Captain Aidan Brooks stood in the darkened control room of his ship, staring at the blinking screens in front of him. The hum of the engines was the only sound breaking the eerie silence of space. Outside, the vastness of the galaxy stretched endlessly, but Brooks' mind was far from the stars. His thoughts were focused on the mission that had brought him and his crew here, to a forgotten, abandoned space station at the edge of the known universe. Brooks was no stranger to difficult missions. As the captain of the Talon, a small but agile human warship, he had fought in numerous battles against the Zentrians, a merciless alien race bent on conquering the galaxy. But no matter how many victories they had won, the war seemed endless. Humanity was running out of time. The Zentrians had grown stronger, their fleets more powerful with each passing day, and the small pockets of resistance on distant planets were losing ground fast. The war was close to being lost, and Brooks felt that deep in his bones. But then, a strange signal had been intercepted, one that no one could explain. It was old, ancient even, a relic from another time, from a civilization long gone. The signal had come from a forgotten space station, hidden in the depths of an uncharted nebula, and Brooks had been sent to investigate. He didn't know what to expect, but his instincts told him it could be the breakthrough humanity needed. "Captain, we've arrived," said Lieutenant Maria Yates, his first officer, as she entered the room. She was a sharp officer, quick on her feet, and she knew Brooks better than anyone. "We're in position. Should we send a team over to board the station?" Brooks turned to face her. His face was weary, the weight of the war pressing down on him, but there was a glimmer of something else in his eyes. Hope, maybe. "Prepare a team. We'll check it out ourselves, but be ready for anything. We have no idea what we're walking into." "Understood, sir," Yates replied. She quickly left to assemble a team of engineers and scientists. The Talon hovered just outside the dark station, its engines dimmed to avoid detection. As the team boarded a shuttle and made their way to the station's airlock, Brooks couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something extraordinary. Or something dangerous. The airlock doors hissed open, and Brooks led the team into the dimly lit interior of the station. The corridors were lined with strange alien symbols, and the air was thick with dust. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy that Brooks couldn't understand. It was as if the station itself had been waiting for someone to come and wake it from its long slumber. "Let's spread out," Brooks ordered, his voice echoing in the empty hallways. "Stay in contact and keep your weapons ready. We don't know what's here." As the team moved deeper into the station, the silence grew heavier, almost oppressive. The air felt cold, but there was a strange warmth coming from somewhere deep inside the station. It wasn't the warmth of life, at least not the kind Brooks was used to. This was something older, more ancient. They found a large control room at the center of the station, and inside a massive console covered in dust and grime. It looked like it hadn't been touched in centuries. Yet there was a strange energy emanating from it. Brooks approached cautiously, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He waved for his engineers to join him. One of the engineers, a young woman named Clara, stepped forward. She ran her hands over the console, her fingers brushing over buttons and levers that seemed both alien and familiar at the same time. "Sir, I think this is a control panel, but it's so old, I can barely make sense of it." Brooks stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. "Can you get it online?" Clara hesitated, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's like the station is asleep, but I think I can wake it up. It's just going to take a moment." As she worked, Brooks' thoughts wandered. He was exhausted from the war, and he knew his crew was too. Every battle had taken something from them. Every loss had chipped away at their spirit. But now, in this moment, in this forgotten place, there was a feeling of possibility. If they could find something here, something powerful, maybe they could turn the tide against the Zentrians. Maybe humanity had one last chance. Clara's voice broke his thoughts. "It's coming online, Captain. I think I've got something." The console hummed to life, and a holographic display flickered into view. For a moment there was a bright flash of light, and then the image settled into something resembling a map. But it wasn't just any map. It was a star chart, one that showed a path to a distant corner of the galaxy, a place marked with the same strange symbols they had seen on the station's walls. "What is this?" Yates asked, stepping closer to the display. "It's a map," Brooks replied, his voice low with awe. "A map to something buried deep in the galaxy." Clara tapped a few buttons, and the display zoomed in on one location, a planet, hidden in a nebula far beyond their reach. The planet had been circled as though it was the focal point of the star map. That's it. That's the place we need to go. Brooks studied the coordinates, his mind racing. The location was remote, beyond the reach of any known human colonies or Zentrian fleets. There was no record of any world there, at least none that humanity had ever discovered. The question was, why was it hidden, and what was there waiting for them? "Sir," Yates said, her voice urgent, "this could be a trap. We don't know what's out there. The station could be a lure to draw us in." Brooks turned to face her, his jaw set. "We've already lost too much. We don't have time to wait. The Zentrians will be on us soon, and we have to find something, anything that can help us turn the tide. This may be our only chance." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. They knew Brooks was right, but there was something unnerving about this sudden discovery. What if it wasn't a gift but a curse? "I'm going to send a message back to command," Brooks said, turning to Clara. "But we're going to investigate this. Prepare a shuttle. We're heading to that planet." Clara nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. "Understood, Captain." The crew made their way back to the shuttle bay, and within hours they were in space, headed toward the unknown world. As the shuttle slipped past the nebula's dense clouds, the crew could see the planet ahead, its surface barely visible through the haze. But as they approached, something strange began to happen. The temperature in the shuttle dropped, and the ship's sensors began to glitch. It was as if they were passing through some kind of barrier, one that was not only physical but alive. "This is it," Brooks whispered under his breath. He could feel it. Whatever lay ahead was more than just a planet. It was the answer they had been searching for. "Let's begin," he muttered to himself, echoing the words he had spoken earlier in the control room. The ship's engines hummed softly as they descended, and the crew braced for whatever came next. They had no idea what they would find, but one thing was certain. Their journey had only just begun. The shuttle touched down on the surface of the unknown planet with a soft thud, sending a slight vibration through the ship. Captain Aidan Brooks stood at the front of the shuttle, his fingers gripping the seat's armrest as he gazed out the small window. The planet below was a strange, eerie mix of swirling mist and rocky terrain. The atmosphere was thick and heavy, a dark purple sky overhead with wisps of clouds rolling across the horizon like ghosts. Brooks felt a strange pull in his chest, a mixture of excitement and fear. He knew that the crew had no idea what they were walking into. The ancient star map had led them here, but it had given them no answers, only more questions. "Everyone, stay sharp," Brooks said, his voice steady despite the nerves creeping into his mind. "We don't know what's on this planet, but we do know one thing. We need to find the source of that signal. If it's really what we think it is, this could change everything." The crew nodded, their faces filled with determination, but also the uncertainty of embarking on an unknown path. Lieutenant Maria Yates, who had been by his side for years, gave him a reassuring nod. The rest of the team was a mix of engineers, scientists, and security officers, all people who had been trained to face the worst. But none of them had ever faced something like this. The shuttle doors opened and a rush of cool air swept inside. The planet's atmosphere felt thick, almost heavy. As the crew stepped out onto the rocky surface, Brooks couldn't help but notice the strange silence. There were no animals, no sounds of life, just the whisper of wind and the soft crunch of their boots against the ground. "We're close," Brooks said, pulling up the map on his wrist pad. The destination was marked clearly, an ancient structure deep within the planet's rocky landscape. It looked like a large temple or a bunker, its outline barely visible through the swirling mist. "Let's move out," Yates said, leading the way. The team followed closely behind, their weapons ready, their eyes scanning every shadow, every rustling sound, just in case. As they approached the structure, Brooks couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It wasn't the kind of feeling one gets from a passing animal or an unexpected threat. This was different. It felt as though the planet itself was aware of their presence. The structure finally came into full view, rising out of the mist like a massive, jagged mountain. It was made of dark stone with strange symbols etched into the walls, glowing faintly in the dim light. The doors, though large and imposing, were covered in layers of dust as if no one had touched them in centuries. "This is it," Brooks whispered, stepping closer. "Whatever we find inside, it's the key to everything." Clara, the young engineer who had first unlocked the map, stepped forward with a small device in her hands. "I'll try to get the doors open," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in the air. She worked quickly, tapping at the device's buttons. After a few tense moments, the massive doors creaked and groaned before finally sliding open with a deep rumble. The sound echoed through the cavernous entrance, and a gust of cold air rushed out to greet them. The inside of the structure was even more unsettling. The walls were lined with strange carvings, and the floor was littered with remnants of what seemed like ancient machinery. It was clear that this place had once been a highly advanced facility, perhaps a weapons depot or some kind of military base, but time had worn it down, leaving it abandoned and forgotten. Brooks's heart raced as he stepped further inside. The air felt thick, almost oppressive. There was an energy in this place, an ancient power that seemed to hum just below the surface. The team moved forward cautiously, scanning every corner of the massive chamber with their lights. At the center of the room there was a large pedestal, standing taller than any of them. On it rested a small crystalline object, glowing with a strange blue light. It was beautiful, but it also felt wrong. Brooks couldn't explain why, but something deep inside him told him that this was no ordinary artifact. Clara stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. This is it," she whispered. "I don't know what it is, but it's powerful. I can feel it." Brooks felt a strange tugging sensation in his chest, a pull toward the artifact. He stepped closer, reaching out his hand, but he stopped just short of touching it. "This is it. This is what brought us here." Yates, ever cautious, gave him a warning glance. "Captain, we don't know what that thing is. We have no idea what it can do." Brooks looked at her, his face a mixture of resolve and curiosity. "I know, but we need it. The war against the Zentrians, it's not going to be won with our current tech. This could change everything." With a deep breath, Brooks reached forward and touched the crystal. As soon as his fingers made contact, the room seemed to come alive. The walls vibrated, the floor trembled, and the air around them crackled with energy. "Captain," Yates shouted, her voice filled with panic. "Get away from it." But it was too late. The moment Brooks touched the crystal, the room exploded with a blinding light. For a few seconds, everything went white, and Brooks felt his body pulled from the ground as if weightless. He couldn't hear anything, couldn't see anything, only felt the energy surging through him. Then suddenly the light vanished, and the world around him came back into focus. He gasped, looking around at his team. They were all standing in the same spot, just as they had been moments ago, but everything was different. The room was no longer empty. Ancient machinery hummed to life, filling the room with a low, constant sound. The walls that had once been dark and worn were now glowing with a strange alien light. And at the center of it all stood a massive, dormant warship, like a giant metallic beast. Its shape was sleek yet imposing, and it looked as though it had been waiting for someone to wake it up. Brooks felt his heart skip a beat as he stared at the ship. It was unlike anything humanity had ever built. The technology was far beyond anything they could imagine, and it seemed alive, like it had its own pulse. What is this?" Clara asked, her voice filled with awe. Brooks took a step forward, his mind racing. This is what we came for. This is the Corythian warship." Yates stepped forward cautiously. "Corythian? You mean this ship has been here all this time?" Brooks nodded. "It's been waiting for centuries, and now we've just awakened it." As they explored the ship, Brooks could feel a connection between himself and the warship. It was as if it recognized him, as if it was waiting for him to command it. His hands moved instinctively over the controls that had been dormant for so long, and as he touched them, the warship responded. Lights blinked on and the ship seemed to pulse with life. "Captain," Yates said, her voice filled with wonder. "This ship, it's more advanced than anything we've ever seen. It's alive." Brooks looked at her, a determined glint in his eye. "This is the answer we've been searching for. The warship is ready, and we're going to use it to turn the tide." The sound of the ship coming to life echoed through the chamber, and the team realized that they had just awakened something far greater than they could have ever imagined. The Corythian warship was no longer just a forgotten relic. It was humanity's greatest weapon, and with it, Brooks knew, humanity had a chance to win the war against the Zentrians. But there was one question left. What would the ship demand in return for its power? Captain Aidan Brooks stood in the command room of the Corythian warship, his fingers hovering over the controls. The massive ship hummed with life, its enormous system slowly coming online, but Brooks could feel it. This was no ordinary piece of technology. It was alive, responding to him, waiting for his command. The walls of the command center glowed softly, lighting up as though the ship itself was awakening from a long, deep slumber. The rest of the crew stood silently behind him, awestruck by the sheer size and power of the warship. Its interior was unlike anything any human had ever seen. Sleek, metallic surfaces that seemed to shimmer with an energy all their own. There were no visible seams, no wires or cables. It was as if the ship itself was crafted from a single piece of material, an alien design that defied human understanding. "This is incredible," Lieutenant Maria Yates whispered, her voice reverberating through the empty command room. "It's like the ship is alive." Brooks turned to face her. His eyes were hard, filled with the weight of the responsibility he now carried. "It's not alive, not in the way we understand it. But it has power, more than we can imagine. We need to figure out how to use it. And fast. The Zentrians won't wait for us to get ready." The team, though still in awe, knew the importance of what was happening. Their lives, their future, rested on how well they could control this ship. They were no longer just a small group of survivors. They were now the last hope of humanity, armed with a weapon that could turn the tide of the war against the Zentrians. Dr. Clara Jensen, the engineer who had first unlocked the map leading them here, stepped forward, her fingers brushing over a series of glowing symbols on the console. "I think I've figured out how to start the ship's weapons systems," she said, her voice filled with excitement and apprehension. "It's not easy, but I can activate the main cannon." Brooks stepped up beside her, looking at the glowing console. "Do it," he said. "We need to know what this thing can do." Clara took a deep breath, her fingers moving quickly over the alien controls. The hum of the ship grew louder, and Brooks could feel a deep vibration under his feet. The ship seemed to be responding to Clara's commands, drawing on the energy stored deep within its systems. Slowly, the room darkened as a massive holographic display appeared before them, showing a map of the surrounding space. "It's targeting a Zentrian fleet," Clara said, pointing at the screen. "They're moving toward Earth." Brooks clenched his fists. The Zentrians were getting closer, and their fleets had been devastating in their efficiency. But now, with the power of the Carithian warship, humanity had a chance. "I'm activating the main cannon," Clara said, her voice steady. "Brace yourselves." Without warning, the ship's center trembled again, and a brilliant beam of light shot out from the warship's core. It streaked across the stars, a flash so bright that it lit up the surrounding space for miles. Brooks watched in awe as the beam struck a Zentrian ship, ripping it apart in an instant. The entire ship disintegrated in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only a cloud of debris. The crew stared at the screen, wide-eyed and breathless. They had never seen anything like it. The Carithian warship's weapon was far beyond anything humanity had ever built. The sheer destructive power of it left Brooks with a sense of awe and fear. If they used this weapon too carelessly, it could wipe out entire fleets, entire worlds. That's unbelievable," Yates whispered, still processing what had just happened. "How do we stop them now? With this ship, we can wipe out entire Zentrian fleets." Brooks nodded, but there was no joy in his eyes. He had seen too much destruction in the war to feel anything but caution. "We have power now, yes, but we can't become like them. We must use this ship wisely. We're not just fighting for victory, we're fighting for humanity's soul." Clara looked back at the console, her brow furrowed. "The ship's systems are still being calibrated. We need time to understand its full potential. But it's clear that we've just scratched the surface." Brooks nodded. He knew that time was not on their side. Every second counted in this war. "We don't have the luxury of time. We need to start training the crew to use this ship. We need to prepare for the next battle." As Brooks and the crew began to organize their efforts, the warship's AI, a deep voice that seemed to echo in their minds, spoke again. "Captain Brooks, the warship is ready to serve. My systems have detected multiple Zentrian vessels moving toward Earth. Shall I engage?" Brooks turned to the crew, his face hardening. "Yes, engage. It's time we show the Zentrians what humanity is capable of." The battle begins. The Carithian warship, now fully operational, emerged from the planet's atmosphere and entered deep space. Its sleek form cut through the stars like a predator, its engines leaving behind a trail of shimmering light. Brooks stood at the command center, watching as the crew worked to prepare for the upcoming battle. Yates was at the weapons console, Clara at the engineering station, and Dr. Jensen was working closely with the ship's AI to ensure that everything was running smoothly. The tension in the room was palpable. The crew had no real experience with the Corithian warship systems, but they were learning fast. Every moment counted. Brooks surveyed the star map, noting the incoming Zentrian fleet. It was massive, at least 20 ships, some of them carrying enough firepower to destroy entire colonies. But the warship was not afraid. It had been designed to fight, and now under Brooks's command it would. Targeting systems are locked, Clara reported from the control panel. Weapons are ready. We can take them out in one shot if we want. Brooks glanced at her, his eyes narrowing. Not yet. Let's see what they do first. We're not here to start a massacre. We need to send a message. The Zentrians were close now, and the warship's sensors detected their approach. Brooks could feel the tension in his chest as the enemy ships drew nearer. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The future of humanity hung in the balance. Captain, the AI spoke again. The enemy fleet has entered range. Shall I fire? Brooks took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, fire the main cannon. Clara's hands flew over the controls, and the warship's massive cannon fired once again. The beam of light shot across the distance between the ships, striking the lead Zentrian vessel. The ship shattered into pieces, exploding in a burst of fire and debris. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through the nearby ships, causing several of them to lose control. The Zentrians, now realizing the true power of their enemy, began to scatter. Some tried to return fire, but the warship's advanced shielding blocked their attacks effortlessly. The Corithian warship was an unstoppable force, a weapon that the Zentrians had no hope of matching. One by one, the remaining Zentrian ships were taken out, their weapons useless against the sheer might of the warship. It was over in minutes, a complete victory for humanity. Brooks stood in silence, watching the battlefield unfold before him. The Zentrians had been defeated, but something nagged at the back of his mind. This was just the beginning. The war was far from over, and the Corithian warship, with all its power, could not guarantee humanity's survival. They would need to learn to control it, to use it wisely. We've won this battle, Brooks said, turning to his crew. But we've got a long way to go before the war is over. The crew nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The warship had given them a fighting chance, but only if they could harness its power without letting it consume them. The future of humanity was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Now they had a weapon to fight back. The Corithian warship, now fully under their command, sailed through the stars like a colossal predator. The crew of humanity's last hope had already proven themselves in battle. With the ship's powerful weapons, they had shattered a Zentrian fleet in minutes. But Brooks knew it wasn't over yet. The Zentrians would not stop until they were sure the warship was destroyed, and their invasion of Earth would continue. Brooks stood in the command room, his eyes glued to the star map. The vast expanse of space stretched before him, and he could see the movements of the Zentrian fleets, hundreds of ships still closing in on Earth. But they hadn't yet realized the full power of the Corithian warship. Brooks hoped that advantage would give them a momentary edge, but time was running out. Captain, we've received new intel, Lieutenant Maria Yates said, her voice cutting through the silence. The Zentrians are organizing a full assault on Earth. They've called in reinforcements from their home planet, and we estimate they'll arrive in less than 2 days. Brooks frowned. So we have less than 2 days to turn this around. We can't let Earth fall. The crew had been training, learning how to use the Corithian warship systems, but Brooks knew the ship's true power could not be wielded recklessly. They had to be careful. One wrong move could lead to disaster, and they could not afford mistakes. Clara Jensen, the young engineer who had been instrumental in unlocking the warship systems, stood by a console, her hands flying over the controls. I've been studying the Zentrians' movements, she said. If we launch a counterattack now, we have a chance to disrupt their supply lines before they can gather all their forces. We could cripple their reinforcements before they even reach Earth. Brooks turned to face her. He had always trusted Clara's judgment, and her plan seemed sound. But there was always a risk when dealing with such an unpredictable enemy. We don't have time to wait, Brooks said, his voice hard. Get the ship ready. We're going to strike them first. We'll take out their supply lines, and if we're lucky, we can disable their reinforcements before they arrive. The crew sprang into action. The Corithian warship was a complex beast. with weapons that needed to be calibrated and systems that required constant adjustments. But the team worked with precision, quickly preparing for the assault. Clara focused on the ship's targeting systems, ensuring the weapons would be able to hit their marks. Yates and the other officers prepared for battle, checking their weapons and coordinating the ship's defenses. Brooks walked to the observation window, looking out into the vastness of space. The stars seemed so far away, yet the danger was right in front of them. The Zentrians were coming, and they had to be stopped. For the sake of Earth, for the sake of humanity, they had no other choice. The warship's engines hummed to life as it moved through the darkness of space, heading toward the Zentrian fleet's supply station. It was located on a barren moon orbiting a gas giant. The station was heavily guarded, but Brooks had studied the Zentrian strategies. He knew how to outsmart them. "We're approaching the station, Captain." Clara's voice came through the comms. "I've hacked into their sensors. We'll be invisible to them for the next few minutes." Brooks nodded. "Good, let's make sure we strike fast. No mistakes." The Corythian warship was unlike any other. With its stealth capabilities, it glided toward the Zentrian supply base, invisible to the enemy's detection systems. The crew had to move quickly. The longer they stayed near the station, the more likely they were to be discovered. Yates stood at the weapons console, targeting their fuel storage and weapons supplies, preparing to fire. Brooks's eyes remained fixed on the main display. The Zentrian supply station was coming into view, a cold industrial complex surrounded by defense systems. A few Zentrian ships were docked nearby, their shields up and engines running. "Fire," Brooks commanded. The main cannon of the Corythian warship erupted in a blinding flash, sending a beam of energy toward the station. The impact was devastating. The fuel storage exploded, sending debris and fireball-like bursts into the vacuum of space. The explosion rippled through the station's defenses, causing massive damage. The Zentrian ships closest to the blast were obliterated, their metal hulls torn apart in seconds. The warship fired again, taking out several more targets before the Zentrians even had time to react. It was clear they had no idea what was happening. The Zentrian fleet, unprepared for this kind of attack, scrambled to respond, but it was too late. "We're being detected," Yates called out. "Enemy ships are coming out of hiding." Brooks knew they didn't have long. He quickly gave the order to retreat. "We've done enough damage here. Let's get out of range before their reinforcements arrive." But just as they began to retreat, the massive Zentrian command ship appeared on the station's perimeter. It was much larger than any other Zentrian ship Brooks had seen, an imposing vessel with powerful weapons and thick armor. Its size alone made it clear that this was a flagship, and it was heading straight for them. "We've got company," Yates said, her voice tight. "They're coming straight for us, Captain. It's too big to avoid." Brooks didn't hesitate. He quickly ran to the tactical display and began analyzing the situation. "Activate evasive maneuvers. Let's see if we can make them chase us." The Corythian warship darted through space, zigging and zagging to avoid incoming fire. The Zentrian flagship followed closely behind, firing powerful beams that shattered the emptiness of space. But the warship was faster, more agile. The Zentrian ship had more firepower, but it lacked the maneuverability that the Corythian vessel possessed. "Firing again," Yates called out. The Corythian warship's weapons unleashed a barrage of smaller, precise shots, hitting the Zentrian flagship's weak points, its engines, its weapon systems. The Zentrian ship staggered, its shields flickering. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it was enough to make the flagship vulnerable. "We've damaged their shields," Yates reported. "They won't be able to keep up much longer," Brooks nodded. "Let's finish this." With a final blast from the warship's main cannon, the Zentrian flagship's shield shattered and the massive vessel began to break apart. The explosion was catastrophic, sending shockwaves across space, and the Zentrian fleet began to scatter. Brooks looked at his crew, his heart pounding in his chest. They had done it. The Zentrians were broken. For now, Earth was safe. Regrouping as the dust settled from the battle, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. The Zentrians had been defeated, but Brooks knew this victory was just one battle in a long war. The warship had given them a fighting chance, but it wasn't invincible. They would need to be smart, careful, and work together if they wanted to win the war for good. "We've won today," Brooks said, turning to face his crew. "But this is just the beginning. The Zentrians will regroup and they'll come at us harder next time. We need to be ready." Yates, Clara, and the rest of the team nodded in agreement. They were tired, but the fire in their eyes showed they were ready for whatever came next. They had a new weapon, a powerful tool that could help them defeat the Zentrians, but it was also a weapon that needed to be used with caution. Brooks looked out at the stars, knowing that their fight was far from over. But today they had made a stand, and for the first time in a long time he believed humanity had a chance. "Let's get to work," Brooks said. "The real fight is just beginning." The Corythian warship had become humanity's greatest weapon. With its powerful technology and weapons, it had turned the tide of battle in their favor. But now, after their stunning victory against the Zentrians, Captain Aidan Brooks knew the war was far from over. The Zentrians were relentless, and they would not stop until Earth was destroyed. Brooks and his crew were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of humanity itself. The ship's control room was alive with activity. The crew was exhausted but determined, their faces lit by the glow of the ship's holographic screens. Brooks stood at the front of the room, looking at the star map in front of him. The Zentrian fleets were regrouping, moving toward Earth once again. "We can't afford to wait for them to come to us," Brooks said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "If we let them rebuild their forces, they'll come at us stronger than ever. We need to take the fight to them." Maria Yates, his first officer, looked up from the tactical display. "Sir, we've received word from Earth. The Zentrians have begun preparing their invasion fleet. They're coming faster than we anticipated. We'll have a window of about 48 hours before they reach Earth." Brooks nodded. "Then we have no time to waste. We strike now. We don't wait for them to get close." The crew sprang into action. The warship's engines powered up and the massive vessel began to move through space, heading toward the Zentrian stronghold. The Corythian warship was the perfect weapon, faster and more advanced than anything the Zentrians could produce. But Brooks knew that while their advantage was great, it was still not guaranteed. As the ship glided through space, Brooks stood at the observation window, his eyes scanning the stars. They had already dealt a serious blow to the Zentrians by destroying their supply lines and flagship. But now they were heading straight for their enemy's homeworld, a place Brooks knew would be heavily fortified and dangerous. "We'll hit them hard," Brooks said, more to himself than anyone else. "We'll break their command center, destroy their fleet, and make sure they know humanity isn't afraid anymore." Into the heart of the beast hours later, they arrived at the Zentrian homeworld, a massive planet surrounded by a thick layer of defense stations and military ships. The Zentrians had built their empire on strength, and their homeworld was their crown jewel. It was heavily protected, and any attack on it would be met with extreme resistance. "Captain," Clara Jensen said, "I'm detecting a large Zentrian fleet approaching. They've begun to mobilize for defense." Brooks took a deep breath. "We expected this. All hands prepare for battle. We're going in." The Corythian warship moved swiftly toward the planet, its engines glowing with power. The ship's stealth systems activated, rendering them nearly invisible to the Zentrian sensors. It was only a matter of time before the Zentrians noticed them, but Brooks was counting on the element of surprise. "Captain," Yates said, "we've breached their outer defenses. We'll be inside the planetary shield in less than 5 minutes." Brooks nodded. "Get ready. When we're inside, we'll hit their main command center first. That's where we'll do the most damage." The crew worked in unison, their movements smooth and practiced. The warship's advanced systems made it easy to target enemy ships, and soon, the first wave of Zentrian defenders was engaged. Laser blasts and energy beams streaked through the void as the battle began in earnest. Brooks's fingers gripped the command chair tightly as he watched the holographic displays, tracking the movements of the enemy fleet. The Corythian warship fired first, striking one of the Zentrian ships with its main cannon. The massive beam cut through the enemy vessel, splitting it apart. The Zentrians retaliated quickly, sending out waves of smaller ships to surround the warship. "Deploy the interceptors," Yates ordered. The warship's smaller fighters launched from their hangar, zipping into the fray. They engaged the Zentrian ships in a flurry of action, cutting through the enemy lines with precision and skill. Brooks could see the Zentrians scrambling to form a defensive perimeter, but it was clear their strategy was falling apart. The Corythian warship was too fast, too powerful. The enemy didn't stand a chance. "We're in position, Captain," Clara said. "The command center is ahead. We just need to get through the final defense grid." Brooks nodded. "Do it. We can't let them regroup. If we take down their command center, The rest of the fleet will fall apart. As the warship sped toward the planetary defense system, energy beams from the surface of the planet fired in their direction, but the Carithian warship's shields absorbed the blasts without a scratch. The ship glided through the defense grid, cutting a path to the heart of the Zentrian stronghold. The final strike. The Carithian warship hovered above the planet's surface, locked onto the Zentrian command center located in the heart of the capital city. The building was massive, sprawling with enormous turrets and fortified walls. It was a fortress designed to withstand the most devastating attacks. Brooks's fingers moved over the controls, and the warship's weapon systems activated. The main cannon charged up, a deep rumbling sound filling the ship's hull. "Lock on target," Brooks said, his voice calm, though his heart raced in his chest. Yates nodded. "Target locked. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The main cannon unleashed a tremendous burst of energy. The beam cut through the air, striking the command center with a blinding flash. The entire structure shook as the energy beam tore through its defenses. The building's walls collapsed and the Zentrian command center erupted in flames. Brooks watched in silence as the command center was destroyed, leaving nothing behind but rubble and debris. The Zentrians' most powerful fortress had been reduced to nothing. "Direct hit," Yates said, her voice filled with awe. "We've done it. Their command center is gone." Brooks let out a slow breath. "The fight isn't over yet. We've broken their backbone, but they'll still come at us. We need to get out of here before they regroup." The Zentrian fleet was already starting to retreat, their ships scattering into the far reaches of space. Brooks knew that they had just delivered a crippling blow. But this was not the end. The Zentrians would regroup, rebuild, and try again. But humanity had proven something today. They were capable of fighting back, of standing up to the most powerful force in the galaxy. A new dawn, the Carithian warship left the wreckage of the Zentrian homeworld behind, its engines blazing as it sailed through the stars. Brooks stood at the command center, staring at the stars ahead. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The Zentrians would return. They always did. But humanity had changed. They had found something within themselves that they had never known before. They had discovered the strength to fight, the courage to stand against impossible odds, and the knowledge that their future was theirs to shape. Yates walked up beside Brooks, her eyes fixed on the stars as well. "What now, Captain?" Brooks turned to her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Now we rebuild. We learn from this, and we keep fighting. Earth is just the beginning. The galaxy is vast, and there are many more battles ahead, but we've shown that humanity is stronger than anything the universe can throw at us." He looked out into the vastness of space, knowing that the journey was just beginning. The war with the Zentrians was far from over, but now humanity had the will and the power to win.